Lines. Whether you're designing a book cover, an album cover, a website, an article of clothing, even a building, lines play an important part in how the structure is perceived. Today we will take a quick introductory look at lines so that you may be more aware of the lines that are around you and how they ultimately impact the design process. In this image here, we see three circles that are in space. But by adding lines, we can divide this space up so the viewer has a better sense of what's going on. For example, a horizontal line places this as a heading. Two vertical lines separate each sphere into their own separate section. Lines could be long or short, straight or curved, thick or thin, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. How you choose to use your lines really depends on the situation and the information that you're trying to get across. So there is no right or wrong. There really is, at this point, it's what works. So experiment with the use of those lines and let your eye guide you as you decide which line is best for your particular situation. Lines in everyday life. Where would we be without lines? Well, famous album cover, Abbey Road, has the Beatles crossing the road in a crosswalk. Where would the Beatles be without that crosswalk? They may have never actually crossed Abbey Road. Lines are used for practical reasons. We have big, thick lines that tell people how to cross a street. There are no words there. We have long, narrow dash lines that tell people which side of the road to drive on. And we have these dash lines going all around the image, and if that were on a cereal box, for example, we would know that that should be cut out. All that information is used simply by the use of the proper line at the proper time. Definition time. Down rule. In page layout, down rules refer specifically to vertical rules placed between columns of text used to provide greater visual separation between the columns. If you look closely, you will see that there are lines in between these columns of text. Without those lines, the reader would be confused and would attempt to read left to right. The lines tell them to read top to bottom, jump over to the next column, top to bottom, all by the use of a simple line, also known as a down rule. Implied lines. An implied line is one that is suggested by the positions of shapes or objects, whereas actual lines are lines that are physically present in a design. This is an actual line. This is an actual line. These are implied lines. The shape of the words imply the fan-like motion and the fan-like shape. In this piece of work, the words are used to define that space: circular, rectangular, narrow, almost arrow-like. And of course, in the interest of good design, we're going to put our definition in a box so that it's just not floating in space. So again, as you continue to study lines in your environment, like whether it's on a piece of clothing, whether it's a street sign, wherever you see lines, ask yourself, how could I use those lines in my design? Another example of down rule, which we just spoke about, is in this newspaper art magazine here. And you can see that even though lines are not used, the space between the columns implies to the reader that they should read top to bottom, then to the right, and then top to bottom. So even though there are no lines, there is a space that implies the line. So as you continue to begin your study of graphic design, you need to focus on how others use lines and then begin to experiment with the use of any sort of line in your design. Let your eye determine whether or not you've made the right decision.